Why was there a conflict between Judah and the rest of Israel early in David's reign? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Samuel on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 2 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 to 11. Before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Samuel chapter 2, verse 1. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Samuel chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. It happened after this that David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up to any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said to him, Go up. David said, Where shall I go up? And he said, To Hebron. So David went up there, and his two wives also, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. And David brought up the men who were with him, every man with his household. So they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. Then the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. And they told David, saying, The men of Jabesh-Gilead were the ones who buried Saul. So David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh-Gilead, and said to them, You are blessed of the Lord, for you have shown this kindness to your lord, to Saul, and have buried him. And now may the Lord show kindness and truth to you. I also will repay you this kindness, because you have done this thing. And therefore let your hand be strengthened and be valiant, for your master Saul is dead, and also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. But Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. And he made him king over Gilead, over the Asherites, over Jezreel, over Ephraim, over Benjamin, and over all Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign in Israel, and he reigned 2 years. Only the house of Judah followed David. And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. At the end of 1 Samuel, we had the death of Saul. And as is the case with all thrones, when the king dies, there is an immediate transfer of power to the next in line to the throne. The formal coronation may occur at a later date, when the country will formally swear allegiance to the king, but the transfer of power happens immediately. Usually thrones are passed from the father to his next oldest child, and in this case, since the 3 other sons of Saul were killed at the battle with the Philistines in the Jezreel Valley, that would have been Ishbosheth. But recall, in Israel, God was the one who was in control over who would be king, and because of Saul's sins, he cut off Saul's family from being king, and anointed David king over Israel instead. So at Saul's death, David was now king. But this didn't mean that all Israel immediately viewed David as the proper king. Up until 40 years earlier, Israel had God as their king, judges as God's representatives from time to time, and were largely tribal in nature. This would be the first transfer of power from king to king in their history, and it did not go smoothly, to say the least, for in the beginning only Judah recognized David as their king, having anointed him as such after Saul's death. This would make sense, as David was from Judah. Northern Israel, though, especially the tribe of Ephraim, was used to playing an outsized role in the governing affairs of Israel due to the tabernacle being located in Shiloh up until the days of Eli. For them, it will take quite a while to come to grips with the king coming from Judah, and even then that would only last for 2 kings, David and Solomon, before the northern tribes split away from Judah. We'll deal with who the northern tribes viewed as king in a few moments. The question for David, though, is where was he going to go and rule? He was in Ziklag, but that was seen as a city of the Philistines, and so that would not be suitable for a place for an Israelite king to rule from. David asked God, and God told him to go to Hebron, the city given to the descendants of Caleb, a Levitical city for the priests from the house of Aaron, a city of refuge, and the location of the cave of Machpelah, the burial place of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Why didn't God send David to Jerusalem? Because at this time, that city was under Jebusite control and wouldn't be captured until a little later in David's reign. And so, with God's blessing, David, his family, and the families of the men who had been traveling with him during his exile from Saul came and dwelled in Hebron and the neighboring towns. It would be there that word came to David about what the men of Jabesh Gilead had done for the body of Saul in giving it a proper burial. This act pleased David, and he called on the Lord to bless the people of Jabesh Gilead, something that David said he would do as well. But as we said a few moments ago, David was king, but over Judah alone. He would rule in Hebron over Judah for a period of seven and a half years. What happened to the northern tribes? Well, Abner, the commander of Saul's army and Saul's cousin, had survived the battle at Gilboa, and he made Ishbosheth, Saul's remaining son, king. Ishbosheth began his reign at 40 years old and reigned over Israel for 2 years. Now this discrepancy of 5.5 years between the reign of Ishbosheth and the time before David was anointed king over all Israel has confused a great many people. And there are a great many solutions as to how to answer this supposed problem. Some say that the 2 years of Ishbosheth's reign only should be counted from the time of his anointing until the time that war broke out between his house and David's house. Some believe that Ishbosheth wasn't made king over Israel until 5.5 years after Saul's death, and thus the 2 years of his reign should be counted from then on. And then there are some who say that 5.5 years should be taken to mean that after Ishbosheth's death, it took the northern tribes that long to anoint David as king over them. All of these solutions have their pros and their cons. For instance, if Ishbosheth immediately became king over northern Israel, how did he so soon become in control of places that at the end of 1 Samuel was said to have been under Philistine control, like the Jezreel Valley? If Ishbosheth didn't become king until 5.5 years after his father's death, why did he wait so long, and why didn't David seek to unite Israel under himself during that time period? And if Israel waited 5.5 years after Ishbosheth's death to recognize David as king again, why did David wait so long to unite Israel? Personally, from the text, I believe the answer is that Ishbosheth didn't become king over northern Israel until 5.5 years after Saul's death. The reason? For the very fact that the Philistines controlled much of the area in northern Israel after Israel's defeat at Gilboa. David didn't yet have the army to take on the Philistines' control there, and it didn't seem that it was God's will for him to do that yet, which is why David didn't seek to unite the kingdom at that time. In the interim, it appears that Abner, or someone else in northern Israel, led a resistance against the Philistines there and expelled them. For when we get to chapter 5 and all Israel coming to anoint David, we don't read of David going up to free northern Israel from Philistine occupation. That seems to have already happened. Thus, when that was over, which is not unreasonable to assume would have taken a long time, Abner, not wanting to submit to David as king, set up Ishbosheth to rule in Mahanaim, the city he probably settled in after the battle of Gilboa. Mahanaim was a city east of the Jordan near Penuel, with Penuel being that city that Gideon destroyed back in Judges 8. Ishbosheth would rule from there over Gilead, the 2.5 tribes east of the Jordan. The Asherites, likely representing the northern tribes of Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali, and Dan. Jezreel, including the half-tribe of Manasseh west of the Jordan, and Issachar, as well as Ephraim and Benjamin. Simeon, which lived among the tribes of Judah, were probably included in Judah as those who followed after David. Whether or not you agree with me on this point, or whether you take one of the other solutions as being true, is really immaterial to our understanding of this passage, as the length of Ishbosheth's reign is not the point. It is what will occur after he becomes king. However, for the skeptics out there, the text can be harmonized and can be shown to be without error, even if we're not entirely certain as to which solution is correct. We're going to continue with the aftermath of Ishbosheth being named king over northern Israel, beginning, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Samuel chapter 2, verses 12 to 23, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.